Today I'm going to show you how I sculpt a mane on my model horse. So here I have two small equal parts of epoxy sculpt clay. This is a really great clay for sculpting with. It's a two-part that takes a couple of hours to cure, and I really like it because you don't have to do anything really to get it to cure. All you have to do is let it sit and it will cure on its own. You don't need to bake it or anything like that. So it's definitely a lot different than sculpty clay. Here I am just kind of making little flat pieces of clay and I'm just pressing them onto the neck of the model. So you just want to make sure they're kind of firmly pressed on, but you don't want to squish them too much that they flatten out completely. And then I've actually got a little dental tool here. So this is a silicone tipped dental tool and I love this. It is my tool of choice for all of my sculpting. I pretty much do most of my sculpting with this tool and just an old paintbrush. So here you'll see I'm smoothing the top of the mane on the neck just so it has a nice smooth blend. And then I'm going in and kind of pressing the clay into place and pressing lines into the clay to give it a mane texture. So a big mistake that I see a lot of new artists make is that they will draw lines in the clay, and you don't really want to draw lines. You want to be more of using a pressing motion. So the pressing motion will vary the depth of the lines and do things like that just drawing doesn't really do. And I keep doing this until I have what I want for texture. And sometimes it can take me a long time to create a mane, especially on a little stablemate. I can work this clay for 20 minutes or half an hour. It does typically start to harden up and cure in about 2 hours, so you don't have a ton of time to work with it. You do kind of have to move fairly quickly. That's why it's good to just use small little batches of clay at a time. And here I'm going over it with a paintbrush. So using an old paintbrush, you want to dip it in some water and just run it over your clay. This will smooth everything out and make any sharp little pieces flatter and smoother. If you overwork it with a paintbrush, you might run the risk of flattening your clay too much. So go gentle with the paintbrush, and all I'm using is water. So I dip my sculpting tool into water to lubricate it and help it slide along the clay easier. And then I use the water for my paintbrush, and that just makes everything go nice and smooth. Here you can see I'm just adding more lines. So I'm actually just trying to define the strands a little more, and by pressing deeper into the clay, you'll get more definition. I personally always wear gloves when I'm working with epoxy sculpt. So I know some people don't have any reaction to the epoxy and some people do. I was one of those people who never had a reaction to the epoxy in my life until recently. And then I started to get this weird, like almost little red bumps on my fingers. And I actually did speak to my doctor about it, and they said it was possibly some sort of a reaction, allergic reaction to something. And I attributed that to probably the epoxy sculpt. Ever since I've been wearing the gloves, I haven't had any issues with that sort of rash or anything. So I do think that the epoxy does give you a rash if you use it for an extended amount of time with your bare hands. So I like using the gloves. I use a fairly tight glove just so it stays fitted to my fingers, and that does help me get more definition out of the clay and work the clay a little easier. Now here I've got another little chunk of clay, so I've decided I want to add like a little wisp of clay, of hair, towards the top of the mane. So I've got another piece of little clay and I'm rolling it out into kind of like a noodle-like shape. Just a long cylindrical sort of noodle of clay, and I'm going to press that gently on. So I don't press down too hard just because I don't want it to mess up the hair underneath that I've already sculpted. And then I'm going to go back in with my dental tool and keep working this. So just again pressing it at the top where the crest of the mane would be, and then smoothing it into the rest of the hair. As I go, I'm using my tool to kind of push the clay and move it into place where I need it to be. And then I'm gently pressing my lines into place. Again, trying not to draw because we don't want it to look too perfect or anything like that. I try to vary my pressure and try to vary the direction that I pull the hair in. And you can see, like, I'll just layer lines on top of some of the other sections of clay. If you have a little bit of variation, that's going to make the hair look a little bit more realistic. So here, again, I'm going in with my brush and smoothing everything. And now you can see the finished horse. So here he is with his beautiful new mane.